Mary Peterson, and head writer and showrunner Peter Mitchell. Yeah, you know, us guys, they don't make these chairs for us guys with short legs. They need a booster seat just to get up into the chair. Guys, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for coming out of the dark writer's room where you're not allowed to have any light to talk to us about the show. Peter, before we kind of talk about what goes on in the writer's room on a regular basis, can you kind of talk about how you guys approached, how the team approached season 10, and were there certain milestones that you wanted to touch on going into this season?
Season 10, I think we approached it with a sense of panic at first. 10 seasons. I think an awful lot of it was just talking about stories this year. We didn't really have any particular set goals in mind, except to try and keep up the level of the show. The set goals of the series start to evolve as we start writing. So I'd say at least the first month to 6 weeks was just completely about story and a little bit about what we wanted to do with the characters. But we knew that once we'd hit about 134 episodes, finding compelling mysteries and stories was going to be our #1 job.
And how long ago, like you're just about to start filming the holiday episode, is that right? That's coming up production-wise?
Yeah, we're starting on the third to last block of episodes this Wednesday.
So how long ago did you all get together in the writer's room and start hashing out season 10 episodes and stories?
When was that? February.
February.
Yeah, and I think we started shooting in May.
And so how much of a lag time in between season 9 and season 10 are you from the writer's room from season 9 into the writer's room for season 10?
I guess probably for these guys about 3 months. For me, I'm still doing post-production and stuff. But I think we have about a 3-month break.
That's not a lot of time to have off, Michelle. So how do you spend those 3 months? How do you personally spend those 3 months in between? Are you just are you vacationing? Are you trying to think of anything except Murdoch? Or are you already starting to do research for possible storylines in the next season?
My agent would like me to say that I spend that time writing other pilots, but I don't. I usually catch up on life, sleep, watch a bunch of TV, research the next season. I'm saying that because my boss is sitting here. And that's about it.
And then, Paul, maybe give us a breakdown of what the writer's room is like when everybody's getting together, say, for the first episode of season 10. Has everybody come in with ideas? How does that all work out? You've got a big white board, I know, that needs to be filled, or a board that needs to be filled. So how does that work?
There are always leftover ideas that sometimes we tap into, sometimes we're instructed not to because we should be looking forward. We basically meet and we just tell each other jokes for pretty much a full week. And then we start talking about stories. And then it actually comes pretty quickly. We actually can put, the ideas get put forward, and sometimes they get divided up amongst people to think about more. But it starts slowly, and then it picks up speed. And
then how about the assignments? Because you're not all working on the same episodes. There are episode assignments. So, Jordan, how does that work? How do you decide? How does that shake out into who gets what as the season goes on?
Right. Well, picking up from where Paul sort of left off, we'll all come in that first week of February with a few general ideas or some worlds that we haven't explored yet that we would like to explore. And we see which ones kind of gain traction. And if it was one of your ideas, then generally you'll be the one who gets to write it, but not always. You often end up writing someone else's idea and vice versa, depending on how the schedule breaks down and what Pete's desires are for what he wants out of a particular episode.
And Jordan, like when you're all together in that room kicking around ideas, is it kind of controlled chaos? Who's Paul? Are you the ringleader? Like, how does that all kind of work out? Who's running things? Is it Peter?
Absolutely. Anytime Peter's in the room, Peter's in charge. He's our guiding light, I think. We can definitely go off down a lot of tangents, some of them led by him himself. But it is, I think organized chaos is a good term for it, especially in those early weeks when we're trying to figure out what stories we want to tell for this upcoming year. If you look back at like the notes that we take for a day, there might be a bunch of notes on like 7 different ideas in like a 7-hour day. So we're kind of all over the place in those early stages. And then once we settle on an idea and we say, okay, this is one that we want to pursue, this is something we want to tell this year, then we might spend days on end just on that one idea.
And are there any of you on the panel that are comfortable writing in the room with everybody else there, or are you the type that need to go off and have a quiet space to work?
Paul likes to write in the room. The rest of us, I think, like a little more focus, but Paul thrives on having other people around him.
Paul never wants to be alone. We have a big we have a story room with a few desks in it, and then a couple of the writers have individual offices. But Michelle, Paul, Simon, and I share one big room, and Paul never wants to be left alone in that room. Still not totally sure why, but...
Even if he's under a really tight deadline and we're all working on a completely different story, he refuses to go anywhere else or refuses for us to not talk about the story.
Go home and write, Paul. No, I'm coming in.
I like to put my nose in other people's business.
Now, in the last panel that I was moderating, there were a couple of questions were asked about specific story notes, and one was about the buffalo wing invention. Does anybody remember who came up with that idea?
Peter Mitchell.
But Jordan ran with it. Jordan loved the buffalo wings.
Pete probably threw it out there as a joke, and I latched onto it, and then it went, as often happens, something that's just an innocent joke in the room, gains traction and becomes a recurring joke in the room. Then it's like, well, maybe we can put that in the show, and then it becomes part of an episode.
Pete's made a lot of jokes that have actually turned into real things in the show.
Do you find that that's becoming more and more the case, or that stuff that you joke about ends up being some of the most memorable stuff that ends up on the screen and in the scripts?
Well, it's definitely memorable to us.
Yeah.
I don't know if the audience necessarily appreciates it as much as we do. A case in point would be the character of Roger Newsom. See crickets. But we all think he's the greatest.
What about the Jolly Jumper? Who came up with that idea?
Paul.
Easy.
Wasn't it?
I
believe it was
I
Jordan.
think I'm going to take credit for the Jolly Jumper,
Oh, sorry.
which I named the Gleeful Bouncer.
Oops.
That ends up being, as I said in the panel with the behind the scenes, some of that stuff, those in jokes that just make it so much more fun for the audience when you can kind of see it coming, and it's something that's so important in our lives, like a Jolly Jumper that we all grew up with, that it ends up being worked into the show. You guys must have a lot of fun working those things in while sticking with the storyline, which is, having somebody be killed every week.
One of my favorites, I think, was when Pete suggests the profession for Crabtree's aunts. And it was mentioned as a joke, but it was I thought it was inspired, and we went with it.
This season, we're going to be seeing the episode later today. The Great Fire ends up being part of the storylines in season 10. Peter, how did you, when I talked to you a couple of years ago, you said that it was going to, that it was coming on the horizon in the calendar, and wondered how you were going to handle it. Were there challenges in handling the Great Fire and how it was going to impact on the folks that we watch every week?
Well, there's a couple challenges. One, watching the fan groups and stuff, it was inevitable that we were going to do the Great Fire story. It's something that everybody who watches Murdoch, or a lot of people who watch Murdoch, know about, so there was no way around it. Production-wise, with the show with our budget, the execution of doing the fire is tremendously difficult, and we can only do a little slice of it. As Craig said earlier, maybe it's not a great fire, maybe it's a grand fire, or it's a good fire. And the third part was finding a way to fold it into the story to not make it the story, because fire is terrible, but fire really isn't much of a bad guy. So the fire happens. That's all I can really say about it.
Right.
It's not the most important plot element of that.
Right.
Everybody has a fire, and eventually life goes back to normal.
Right, exactly. Mary, one of the more controversial characters and storylines in this past season was Baby Roland, and having him taken away from William and Julia. Obviously the fans are passionate and really liked him and were sad when he went away. I guess sad's probably the most polite word that I could say in some cases. But does that just show that you guys are on the right track, that you're getting the audience still interested in these characters and connecting with them when you can do a storyline like that and get so much response from the audience?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the whole team finds it really inspiring when people are, even if they're disagreeing with the way that we executed something, that they're so passionate about it. And Roland was a good example about that. And I miss those babies around set too, so I don't disagree with them all the time.
When you guys are writing, are you writing thinking about the audience and what the audience is going to think? Because I don't know how many of you are on social media, but you see all the Murdoch Mysteries fan groups on Facebook, and they're passionate. Are you writing with them in the back of your mind ever, or are you still writing for yourselves? What about you, Peter?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
I'd be lying if I said I didn't pay attention. I'd also be lying if I said I ever did what they really wanted.
Anybody else? Does the fans impact on?
That's pretty much true for all of us. I mean, we come up with the stories as a group, so we're always aware of what a story is going to be, how it's going to impact our characters, and how the audience might respond to that. We're not blind to it, but it's, again, what the audience wants isn't necessarily what's best for the show or what's best for the characters or what's going to make the most interesting storyline with the most longevity.
I think we also try to be pretty aware of if not what the fans want, but what the expectations for the show are. Like, it's a show about a guy that makes inventions to help solve crimes, so we're very conscious of the fact that we need to have inventions now and again in the show and that kind of thing.
Paul, did you want to add to that?
Oh, just the story comes first.
Yeah. What about the historical, the characters that come into play, the inventions that come into play? It seems that, you go to Wikipedia, and so many of the things that you guys have in the storylines actually happen in history. And as a history buff, I find it fascinating. So does it blow you away sometimes the way that you can make the storylines dovetail with things that actually happen?
Well, we try to do that on purpose.
Right.
So...
No, yeah, I didn't mean, it was like, oh, look, there happens to be an Olympics coming up, or there happens to be a great fire. But is it cool, though, when you're doing that research and you say, hey, we can include this because it actually happened, so we can work this into the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of the ones, I really love the historically based episodes. We all love episodes for different reasons. But that was one of the things that first drew me to the show, was the real history in it. And of course, we're not 100% historically accurate. Sometimes you read that history teachers show our show in their classrooms, and it makes us all a little nervous because, we do take some liberties. But it's certainly a great opportunity, and it gives us a lot of story ideas. And why not use Canadian history, or world history for that matter, to enrich our show and make it that much more, cool.
At its core, this show, like Jordan says, about this guy that creates cool inventions to solve crimes. So, how do you guys kind of balance the crime, the murders that are happening with the personal lives? That must always be a delicate balance, especially as you get further and further into seasons, right?
Absolutely. And it is a murder mystery show, without a doubt. That's sort of paramount. So the mystery of the week is always at the top of our minds. But we know that the fans love the characters. The fans want to see the characters live and breathe and interact with each other. And we feel the same way as fans, really, I think. The characters that were created at the beginning and have been brought to life by our cast are so exciting and entertaining week after week. They're what keeps things fresh. So it's always a balance, and it's always a challenge, I think, to make sure that those characters get an opportunity to shine through our story, and they're not spending every single line of dialogue explaining a piece of evidence. So sometimes we come up with stories that come about because we have a cool idea for a crime, sometimes a cool idea from history. Sometimes it's more of we have something we really want to do with the characters from a more personal place, and then we think, well, what could we do in terms of a murder that would fit into that world or that story that week?
And just before we dive back into some questions from me, if anybody has a question for the writers panel, go ahead and line up behind the two microphones that we have set up here, and then I'll flag you in a couple of minutes. So speaking of those murders, Simon, for anybody on the panel, do you feel a case of like morbidity, or do you feel dark and deviant coming up with new ways to kill people?
No.
Did you come up with the killing in this episode that we're going to see today?
No.
Oh, okay. Is it fun coming up with new ways to do it then?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's fun. I mean, because we're a mystery show and not a procedural cop show, I find, at least, and feel free to argue with me, that we don't often start just with the notion of a murder or how someone is murdered. Sometimes that's a detail that comes along later. We're sort of more looking for a mysterious premise or an interesting world in which this can happen, and then hopefully the details of the murder can be specific and particular to that world or to that story or conundrum.
How many deaths have you guys come up with that haven't made it to the show because maybe they were too gruesome? Has that ever been a case, or no? No.
There's not much we stay away from. I mean, we're always aware of the tone of the show, and we want to make sure that we're true to that, and we love that it's a little bit of a light show. There's a humor to it. We can do serious episodes sometimes, for sure, and we can tackle serious issues sometimes, but at the same time, we don't want to ruin anybody's day by doing something so depressing or so serious and real in terms of a murder or a crime that you sort of can't enjoy what's going on. So I think that's sort of the line for us. Other shows that might be a little darker can thrive on that kind of darkness, but we try to stay away from anything that's too far.
Some writers that I've spoken to on other shows talk about how they like writing for a certain character. They just kind of have that character's voice in their head. You're nodding, some of you are nodding your head. So is that a case with some of you? Like, are there characters in your head that you write better for, you feel?
Yeah, Roger Newsom.
No, nobody here. Anybody in particular?
I think all our characters are pretty great,
Yeah.
and I think we all really like writing parts of each of them. I mean, my favorite episodes are when the team comes together and you get to write everybody. It's also a lot of fun when Crabtree has a wild theory. Those episodes are great fun. We all really go to town on those, and then Johnny will go to town on us going to town. It ends up being pretty hilarious. But that said, no, I think we just really love writing the show, period.
I love writing every character.
Yeah, it's harder actually when you're working on an episode where one of the four doesn't have much to do in it. That's more difficult because you feel like you're shortchanging a character that everybody wants to see and that you want to see.
Let's talk about Eva Pierce. Fantastic character. Great to see here in the season finale. And that was one of the darker episodes, I thought. There were definitely some light moments, but that was the case where Murdoch Mysteries, I thought, went very dark with insanity and was downright scary in some cases. Can you talk about that character and what it's been like having her on the show? Peter?
Well, she first came into being, I think, was it an episode that either Carol or Michelle wrote?
Carol Hay wrote it. Murdoch and
so
Ladies
she was
Wear.
more than a gold digger. She was a sort of a classic femme fatale who tried to seduce her way into fortune and was defeated. And we really liked the actress. The actress was, in our minds very early, a female Gillies. And so we brought her back repeatedly. She's a charming person, very easy to work with. And as for the season finale, well, I kind of allow myself one dark episode a year. And since I was directing it, we just went to town on it. But she was fun in the Incurables. Mm-hmm. We liked the idea of this woman being obsessed with Murdoch. And so that made her a villain for two of our characters. And it's nice to have a running bad guy.
Yeah.
And so we're always looking to introduce some more running bad guys.
Is he dead? Is Gillies dead for sure now?
I wouldn't want to say.
See, now that's interesting because my family, every time he shows up, they're like, no, not him again. But you guys clearly have no problem with him. Okay.
He's one of the 50-50s. You know,
Yeah.
when we do sort of objectively or try and categorize what people are digging and what they're not digging, he's kind of a 50-50. I mean, we could probably find just as many who would never want to see him again as are waiting for his next appearance.
I'll let my family know. Peter, you mentioned directing the season finale. What was that like, going, it's not like you haven't done it before, but what's that like? How do you get to flex other muscles directing an episode as opposed to, writing an episode or overseeing the writing of an episode?
Well, I think it's nice because as Craig and those guys were on earlier, you've always got the grinding pressure of the next episode coming up while you're shooting, and it's worse for the writers because the writers are coming up with the episode before the episode and the episode, so when I'm directing, it's the end of the season. I only have, for a moment in time, just one job to do.
Right.
Yeah, so I actually find it kind of zen-like.
All of you have been on this writing staff for at least a couple of years. I think, Mary, you might be the newest, but you've been on in the room for a couple of years, right?
This is my third season.
Third year, congratulations. So at this point, do you all have a shorthand? Do you all get where everybody's coming from? And does everybody have pretty thick skin? Is there a lot of mocking that goes on in the writer's room?
There is a lot of mocking. And yes, we all take it in good spirit for the most part. Some days are more frustrating than others, but in general, we're like a big dysfunctional family. We spend a ridiculous amount of time together. And we all just sort of crack jokes to pass the time instead of working. It's a great procrastination tool.
I feel like that. I feel like there's a lot of procrastinating going on in a writer's room. I guess it just goes with if you're writing, you're constantly putting things
Donald
off.
Trump has been a gift from God for us.
Is that true? Are you using what's going on right now in season 10?
I wouldn't say directly.
Okay.
But I just think that kind of atmosphere kind of permeates. And it's something to talk about for the first 2 hours before we get to work every day.
Okay, so do we have some people lined up to ask some questions? If we do, okay, let's start over here on the right, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Scotty Newlands here from Toronto. First off, I wanted to thank you all very, very much for the production that you put out and we get to enjoy week after week. It's just absolutely a joy to watch. Absolutely, too, guys. Because Murdoch is a period production, with the, shall we say, the socioeconomic and political arena that's just unfolding and the turmoil that's going on, do you find that you want to draw inspiration from what is currently going on in your sessions into your stories, or do you want to sort of devoid yourself completely from that and make it completely about the series with no outside influence because we're all inundated with social media and everything else? Does it become any sort of personal influence or political influence with your writing style?
Well, Mary's got a really good social media story this year. So we do an Edwardian version of social media. So I think we do take these things that are happening today and find some kind of prism to look at, them. But I don't think, although some of our more conservative critics would disagree, I don't think we're trying to attach a liberal agenda or a 20th century agenda to the series. But, we do get inspiration from things that are going on. But we probably get more inspiration from looking backwards,
Right.
into the history of the time.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
And then over here to the left.
Hi, I'm Linda from London, Ontario. I was just wondering whose idea it was to send Terrence Myers away in a rocket. And will we ever see him again?
That was Pete's idea.
Will we ever see him again?
Was it?
You'll have to wait and see.
Okay.
But I think that's an answer right there is when we're all jamming in the room, I think we have a really hard time telling or even remembering whose idea it was. You know, that's because we're all contributing.
That's true, and I think it's the good ones that stick.
Yeah, I mean, Terrence is another galvanizing character. I don't think there's anybody in here, you know, you either love having him on the show or you roll your eyes and like, oh, he's back again. Why can't he just get out of the way and let people actually do things? Another question over here, yes.
Hi, I'm Karen. I just wanted to know, have you ever had anybody or taken ideas from social media, from the fans, and incorporated them into your storylines?
I mean, not really, to be honest. Occasionally we do. We do keep an eye on the Facebook page. We all sort of enjoy seeing your reactions and seeing how you respond to new characters or returning characters and all that kind of thing. More commonly, I'd say we're sitting around working on something, and then we'll see somebody on the Facebook page suggest something similar, and be like, oh, well, can't do that now.
Yeah, it used to be, you know, you'd get letters, you know, the fans would write letters, but now with social media, you see it instantly. You're like, oh, back to the drawing board with that story idea.
I could say honestly, I don't think that we've actually lifted anybody's ideas. I mean, there's a finite number of ideas and there's a finite number of events. So if somebody on social media suggests, you should do an episode about the fire, it's kind of like, well, of course,
right.
You know. But I think we're pretty diligent about not doing that.
Mm-hmm. How do you, after working so many years together in the same room, how do you keep it? Are there any times where you feel stagnant as writers and you're looking to others for inspiration? Like, to me, it would always be a horrible fear that would keep me up in the middle of the night where I don't come up with an idea or I'm afraid that I can't write anymore. Has that happened to any of you during this time on Murdoch?
The great thing about Murdoch is that it's a different show every week. So if I look back on the episodes that I've written, they've all been different. You know, you're not writing, it's not like your procedural where every episode is a version of the same thing. And that keeps our creative voice pretty fresh. And we can go from sending a rocket ship to the moon in one episode, like Paul did, to the next episode where, you know, Giles goes to prison. And those are tonally on opposite ends of the spectrum. And so as a writer, you get to really explore something completely different and flex a completely different writing muscle, so to speak.
And I think the hive brain never runs out of ideas.
Yeah, as Paul alluded to earlier, we have a board in the writer's room with a bunch of ideas that we've never gotten to, and it just keeps growing every year. So, I mean, that pressure of feeling like you have to come in the morning with a new idea or the show will just stop doesn't really exist on this show.
And we lean on each other a lot too, right? Like, we do get stuck when we're working on our own stories, and to be able to turn to Paul and Michelle, Mary, Simon, Peter, Carol, and just say, help me out here, is really comforting. So it never feels like you're sort of left out in the dark on your own. Like, it as Paul said, there's kind of like a hive mind in there, and we're working as a team more often than not.
And we really are a team. There's no ego. No one's afraid to hand in a bad draft or to ask for help. We have worked together for that long, and we're really very comfortable to fail and to have someone else pick us up. So it's really great that way.
Peter, when someone's written an episode and that writer's episode is being filmed, do you like to have them on set and available if there needs to be a quick tweak in a script or a scene or something like that?
I would, as a rule, no,
Okay.
but I'm a little bit outside of the box with a lot of showrunners. I think on specific episodes where I think there may be issues, I encourage that.
Mm-hmm.
We also have directors and assistant directors and actors who've done more than 130 of these episodes. I don't anticipate madness, you know, but the writers are always available by telephone, and if writers want to come out for particular days or particular scenes, I'm completely fine with it, but I don't think it serves the creative all the time to have a writer sitting over a director's shoulder.
anybody on the panel that wanted to talk about an episode in particular that they were really proud of? They were really excited about?
All of them?
Michelle, were there any of Jordan's that you didn't like? No, I'm just kidding. What about a favorite episode written by somebody else? I mean, I know that everybody kind of has their fingers in this Murdoch Mysteries pie, but still there are episodes with one or two people's names on it. So is there any episodes that you guys love that somebody else on the staff wrote, other than all of Peter's?
No, I'd say that for me, because I'm a later arrival to the show than Paul, who's been there pretty much since day one, and Carol, who's not here today, has been there almost as long. I'd say, I think it was my first season on the show. I think Paul's electric car episode was one that sort of encapsulated what Murdoch Mysteries was. You know, for me, I think we've moved on into other areas, but that was one, the electric car one.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'm going to say 20th Century Murdoch is my favorite for a couple of reasons, because I think it has everything in the show. It's got steampunk, it's got good mystery, it has all our characters working toward the same goal, it has Murdoch going a little loopy, it's got science fiction, it's got a great romantic end scene, but it also has a special sort of memory, because when we were writing it, we thought the show was over. So there are 4 of us who have a credit on that. It's Pete, Paul, Carol, and me, and we wrote it together. And I think Pete had a heads up while we were into the process that maybe we were going to keep going, but the 3 of us had no idea. So when we were writing it, it was sort of like an emotional end of what had been a great experience. And I think the episode turned out amazingly, and it's still to this day one of my favorites.
I've got a couple of favorites. Favorite for each of you. What Lies Buried.
Yeah.
Loch Ness Murdoch. A Case of the Yips tied with Murdoch Takes Manhattan because Roger Newsom ×2. Colorblinded. And maybe my favorite, and they're going to say I'm playing teacher's pet here, but The Filmed Adventures of Detective William Murdoch, which is a Pete Mitchell episode, which was wonderfully self-aware and clever and witty and very much about filmmaking and the future of television from 1904. So anyway.
And I think my favorite one is just either finished filming or is being filmed right now. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. You'll see.
Okay, let's take some more questions from the audience. Over here on the left, sir.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Steve. The question I have is, when you're writing it, do you know the ending already and you work backwards? Or you take like a snapshot, it's somewhere in the middle, and work backwards and forwards from that in the plot? That's my first question. The second question, could you give us an update on what Grace is doing now? Thank you.
I think you're talking about how we actually break the mystery? Yeah. I think we use both techniques. I think generally for breaking a mystery, it's really helpful to know where the mystery is going and to work backwards from that and put in the pieces that will eventually sew together to create the mystery. But in terms of actual process, we're not locked into any particular process, and we will basically take an idea and move from there and try to find the mystery with that. And sometimes we'll start with a great mystery idea and then, as you say, work backwards and put it together. And as for Grace, I actually don't know.
Yeah, I think that, I think most of the time somebody will walk in with a really cool, inciting incident, like bang, and then we may jump all the way to the end of this story and say, well, it could resolve like this, and then we find something interesting in the middle, and then we just start filling in the pieces, and then sometimes we throw all that out and start over again. Everybody in this room has a slightly different theory, and that's probably of how to break a story, and that's probably our greatest disagreements. But Paul works completely differently than I do, and I've known him since I was 18 years old, and that's why we're on the opposite sides.
Question over here on the right, please.
Yeah, I laughed out loud when I heard the Tommy Two Cakes nickname, and I'd like to know a little more about it.
Oh.
Are we allowed to answer that?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the genesis of it exactly.
Winston Churchill?
It was the young actor who played Winston Churchill. He really liked his cakes. He really liked his sweets. And he said, I liked the sweets so much, when I was growing up, they called me Tommy Two Cakes. And so we just decided to give that nickname to Brackenreed.
Over here on the left.
I want to thank all of you for a wonderful show. I'm sure you've heard it so many times. My question has to do with Crabtree. We have watched his character grow over the years. We have been with him when he was hopeful about a romantic relationship with Dr. Grace. We watched him almost hang for another love interest. Can we expect to see more character build about Crabtree? And can we expect to see any romance in his future?
You want him to be happy, is that it?
I want him to. I want to see more of the character. I want to see more of his struggles as a human being, and whether it's happy or not in a romantic involvement, I don't know. Just he's a wonderful character.
So she doesn't mean shirtless to see more of him. She means character.
Character.
Oh, I think we see quite a lot of Johnny and his struggles this year. I think that he's torn between a couple of women this year.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Over here, sir.
Good day. My name is Jock. I hail from Kingston, and I'm going to make a quick comment to you. I'm impressed with the modern ethos of policing. To me, it seems there's too much of we shoot first and ask questions afterwards. I think your show sets a very different example where we ask questions first, and only if we need to, we go to the armory to get some weapons. And I think that's a very good example to set to the public. It's something that we could get back to. And as a further comment, I would like to draw your attention to a certain Robert Peel. So Robert Peel is the guy who invented community policing. I'm sure his rules for community policing would be in the police stations here as they were around the rest of the empire. As a matter of fact, I saw them approximately 50 years ago in a police station in Singapore. And they're the same principles that were applied right across the empire. We should get back to them. Thank you.
Anybody want to comment on the comment?
Well, Murdoch has fired his weapon how many times? 3 in 10 years? Yeah. In season 5, he shot a man in the library who was chasing down somebody. That was the one person he's shot. He's tased a guy, and he's physically beat up a couple. But I don't think he's fired his gun more than we couldn't even count. So few, and that's probably even the same with Brackenreed and Crabtree and the rest. So. Your point's well taken.
Question over here on the left, please.
Hi. I would just like to say I do know who Roger Newsom is. And second, thanks. This is a question for all of you. What is your favorite recurring or main character in the entire series?
Well, you already know Jordan's.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I've got a weakness for James Pendrick. as in a man crush.
Anybody else?
I'm Team Pendrick also.
I mean, I was hoping this question would come up. So before my time on the show, there was a character named Darcy Garland who I loved. And I love to say that Darcy Garland's my favorite character because I think as writers we come at this stuff differently, right? We appreciate it when a character maybe isn't likable and isn't an audience's favorite because that's just excitement for us. That's something we can work with. And so I always loved it when Murdoch and Ogden were held apart for whatever reason because I thought it was great drama and it always invested me in their characters really deeply. So I loved it when Darcy was around and I was sad that he died just before I showed up.
And let's not forget Terrence Myers. He may or may not be dead.
How about Leslie Garland? Remember him?
Love him.
The Garland brothers.
Over here on the right, please.
I'd like to know what your favorite invention from Murdoch that you've written about was.
Oh, there are so many. I'm rather partial to the metal detector that was in Murdoch Au Naturel because it was so ridiculous looking and Brackenreed looked so ridiculous doing it that that's one I really enjoyed.
I'd say the airplane, the Pendrick airplane. I like that.
I kind of like the fax machine.
Over here on the left, please.
My name's Nora, and I was wondering, is Murdoch and Julia ever gonna adopt a child or anything and actually keep them?
Mary, do you want to field that one?
Good Lord.
We'll have to watch and find out.
Over here on the right.
Hi, my name's Craig, longtime fan. My question is for Paul. Paul, do you come up with some of the ideas and inventions just to drive the props department crazy?
In full earnestness, you are at the top of our minds sometimes when we come up with these things, and we know that you actually love being put to the test.
So that's a yes.
That is a yes.
Thank you.
Let's go, sir. We missed you last session, so let's get your question in.
You have a talented team of writers here. So wondering, how do you keep the balance? You have so many people. I was thinking of, let's say, the one where the ladies were on the island, and there was someone killing them one by one. That was a very dark episode. But then you had the boys as Station House 4 trying to play curling and failing. How do you keep the balance so you don't lose your focus?
Well, I think that's, we have the big board. And I think that we get lost inside our own stories every once in a while, and it's somebody's job in the room, and that's a rotating kind of job to go, wow, we got 3 kind of heavy episodes in a row. Maybe this episode we were going to do later in the season, we should start to move it closer. And so we're looking to do a balance of socio-political shows, whether it's suffragettes and stuff like that, crazy invention shows, serious crime drama shows, and we're we monitor it all the time, because that's the great thing about this show is funny, serious, goofy, funny, serious, serious, goofy, goofy, funny, funny, serious, 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 character, and we're just constantly looking at the shows and the subject matter, and sometimes we might have a serious subject matter that we end up doing a funny take on. But we're always very mindful that the fans like different things, Some fans want mysteries, some want romance, and some want Victoriana or Edwardiana. And so we're always looking to strike that balance in every episode, and if we don't strike it in every episode, to make sure that the run of 18 episodes has a good, at least a certain number of episodes that we know are going to satisfy the comedy fans or the romance fans or the ones who just want a good damn mystery, thank you very much. So we're constantly evaluating what we're doing. We may throw out ideas that we like because we've got too many funny ones this year. So.
Okay, and then over here, we've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll try and get in as many questions as we can. Over here on the left.
Hi. I was just wondering, with a show so based in history, do you ever dive into old Toronto crime files and pull out anything from there for your ideas?
Take it.
Not so much. We read the newspapers. I do, anyway. I think they're cool. And we do as much research as we possibly can, but we've never, as far as I know, used an actual old Toronto murder.
It turns out they're actually not nearly as interesting as the ones we come up with.
Over here on the right.
Hi, I'm Miriam. There was an interview with Johnny Harris once where he was asked if he ad-libbed being a comedian, and he said no, that the writers are really good and he doesn't ad-lib. The crossover episode that you did with Alan Hocko's show with Doyle when they were in Newfoundland, did you guys write all that colloquialism that he spoke? Because that was quite dense.
Did Johnny Harris actually say he doesn't ad-lib?
Yes, he did.
That's a lie.
No, Johnny came up with all the Newfoundland idiom, especially in the scene when he's getting drunk with the fishermen and stuff. That's pretty much Johnny from stem to stern.
Over here on the left.
Hi. How long does it take to write an episode?
It varies a little bit. It's a good question. It generally takes us anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks to break an episode, to actually figure out what all the story beats are and who's getting murdered and why and all that stuff. It just depends on how complex the episode is or how much time we're devoting to it. And then that individual writer will go off and write the outline, which usually takes about a week, more or less. And then they'll come back and we'll all do notes in the room, and it'll go to the networks and to the production company, and they'll come back with notes. And then that same writer will go off and write the draft, which also takes probably about a week. And they'll come back to the room and do another round of notes and do another draft. So maybe all told 3 weeks, a month, something like that. Is that about right?
It really depends when the deadline is.
That's a good point.
3 weeks to 6 weeks, generally.
Okay, and then we'll take our last question from the floor here.
Hi, I'm Kathy. You've gotten rid of James Gillies. You've gotten rid of Eva Pierce. Who's going to be the next evil person in the series?
Higgins.
Mrs. Brackenreid.
In other words, wait and see. Thank you.
And then as we close out, Paul, there was a question that I thought of while everybody's been talking, and Peter mentioned it. You've been with this show from the very beginning. Paul?
Yes.
Okay. I'm over here. It's me now. What's it been? You know, you've seen this show go from one network to another. You've seen the evolution of this series and what it's become today. What's it been like seeing this little baby grow up and be a 10-year-old?
It feels like the same show. It feels like the show that we sort of began, found itself pretty early, and I think we've done our best to maintain that. What is shocking to me is the number of episodes. It takes me by surprise to know that we've done as many episodes as we have.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all for those great questions. Those were fantastic questions. And thanks to Paul, Michelle, Jordan, Simon, Mary, and Peter for taking the time to come here and answer all these questions. I think we should all thank them very much for creating this world that we love watching every week. So I'm going to turn it over to Muna as we clear the stage, and we'll get ready for the next segment. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Greg and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Michelle, and Jordan, and Simon. That was a fascinating discussion.